Okay, let's unmute the presentation. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, it's nice to see everybody here. Kind of sneaking onto campus between the snowstorms. We did decide to film this, so you're part of a live studio audience. And we're going to make it available to all of you and, of course, to the remainder of registrants who weren't able to make it today. So you can expect to receive that video of this and also the PowerPoint presentation that we're going to be sharing. Before I do get into it too much, though, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Thomas Green. I'm the Associate Director in the Office of International Services, and I'll be presenting today with Keel Hubbard, who's the Assistant Director in OIS, who oversees our advising efforts. Primarily, she focuses on streamlining that and overseeing the staff that handle advising. What we're going to go over today is not really, for those of you who are more experienced, it will be kind of an update on changes that have been coming about from the Department of State or changes that are going to be coming about in the next couple of months. For those of you who are new to the field, it will be more of a little bit of an introduction to the process, but mostly it does cater to not the general process overall, but more to the changes in institutional responsibilities that are coming out from the Department of State. I do ask, of course, we do want there to be clarification as it comes up, but we are going to allow enough time for questions. So we do ask as much as possible. If it's kind of immediately relevant to clarify a point, great. But as far as questions, if we could do our best to save that till the end, that would be wonderful. So the Department of State doesn't come up with radical changes very often. And when it does, however, it's radical. It's like they're conservative for 25 years, and then they don't keep pace with the times, and then they try to make up for all of that, within 6 months. And that's a little bit of what's happening now. So this subpart A, which came out for comments, I think in 2009, and was recently issued as a final rule of subpart A, has some changes that are going to impact the way the institution does business. Now, not dramatically, because we've, for the most part, kept pace with the changes as they were before they became legislative requirements and as they were more policy guidance from the Department of State. There is a distinction between the two. Now, do keep in mind that everything that we say is to update you as close to real time as we're able to. This is supposed to be a final rule, but the Department of State has said there might be a final rule, and that time they really mean it. So we are putting these things into place, but we're also trying to figure it out because we don't want to upset the entire system of the university if the Department of State is going to renege a little bit on some of its policies or go softer on some of its policies. So you are going to have to bear with us over the next couple of months as we get more updates from the Department of State. But this is meant to reflect what the practice is going to be, at least today, moving forward. So some of the changes that are coming out from the Department of State reflect the insurance amounts that go into effect on May 15, 2015. It pertains to updates to J-1 and J-2 contact information and how we report that. How we report final departures of J-2s, which we really hadn't had to report final departures of J-2s, only final departure of J-1s. The Form DS 2019 electronic sharing prohibition, which we'll get to and explain exactly what we mean by that. New and more beefed up legal requirements to certify that the exchange visitor possesses sufficient proficiency in the English language. Again, it's now really becoming, it has always been suggested, not suggested, but in the law written in such a way as to say they must possess proficiency in English, but now they're saying they're giving metrics and standards by which that has to be assessed. And then expanded pre-arrival information, and cross-cultural activities emphasis, which isn't actually new, except that it's, again, a little bit more emphasized in the new law. The first thing to discuss is the changes and the updates to health insurance requirements. For those of you who have been dealing with exchange visitors and have seen the information that we send out to them, having health insurance has always been a requirement of exchange visitors for the dependents and the J-1 principals. The requirement isn't new, and it might be a little bit extreme, but I think the reason why is because there are too many cases where the dependent is coming and going, or coming in late, or being slow in getting the insurance, and then in the meantime needing medical attention, and finding themselves both with a very large medical bill and also in violation of the legal requirement to possess the insurance. So that would sort of be my speculation as to why. The sponsors do have to inform the exchange visitor that they and any accompanying dependents might be subject to the Affordable Care Act. They might be subject to the Affordable Care Act. And in a lot of cases they might not be. It ends up being a tax issue. This isn't so much something that you need to become really versed on. It is something that OIS, in combination with other offices on campus, are honing the information that we are sharing with exchange visitors, but it is becoming more of a requirement. ACA is complicating some of the hirings of exchange visitors, and no doubt a lot of you have experienced some of that with dealing with a 30-hour threshold and having to maintain ACA compliance, and the individual potentially needing to be maintaining individual compliance as well. Okay. With that, the exchange visitor might be able to use the healthcare exchange in order to purchase insurance. And again, that's a bit more of an update in general terms. As far as the new amounts that are going into effect, currently it's a $50,000 benefit that's being doubled to $100,000, which is actually still quite modest as a minimum requirement. Most plans that are offered have more like $1 million or $500,000 minimum benefit. So the $100,000 is actually quite modest. The repatriation of remains was $7,500, which is a grossly underestimated amount. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this euphemism, or the repatriation of remains is, of course, if there's a death of a scholar or a dependent, it's actually getting their remains home in a sensible way. The new rule reflects $25,000, and the medical evacuation goes from $10,000 to $50,000. Likewise, $10,000 is a ridiculously low figure to medically evacuate somebody who needs medical care en route back to their home country. And then the deductible per accident and illness remains at $500, which is meant to keep a single event deductible from getting ridiculously high. So it ends up not, to avoid it being a deterrent to actually using the medical insurance in the first place. The big issue for us is the increased requirement to monitor insurance compliance. This falls primarily to us to educate our exchange visitors, for the departments to understand that we must take a stronger and more firm stand with regard to our scholars maintaining health insurance, and quite simply the scholars and their dependents abiding by what has always been a law. So again, not a new law, but increased monitoring of it that's being required of us from the Department of State. So a big example of this, before OIS would be able to issue an extension, a travel signature, a funding update, or adding dependents to a DS 2019 record, we would have to see proof of ongoing health care coverage. And before we can actually validate a scholar record at the time that they check in with us, which again, some of you had dependents or scholars who just checked in with us this morning, Our next step is typically to validate the CVIS record, which then would allow them to be e-verified and would allow them to kind of the hiring process to be followed through on. Social security number, or quite simply, even if there isn't an HR action linked to us validating the CVIS record, there is a question of their legal status in the U.S. being linked to us validating that CVIS record. And quite simply, we're not going to be able to validate the CVIS record unless and until they show us proof of health insurance that meets the Department of State minimum requirements. J-2 dependents are now required to attend a check-in. Attending a check-in with OIS is actually a really good thing for dependents. Those who do attend the check-in get a lot more out of life here in the U.S. They're a lot more connected with campus. They know a lot more about the resources. It's not a heavy-handed check-in. It's a very friendly, resource-rich check-in. But it's now becoming required to make sure that the J-2s understand what's at stake for them, and also for them, we are going to be collecting health insurance at the time that they arrive in the U.S. as well. J-1 and J-2 dependents, if a J-1 or a J-2 does not maintain health insurance requirements or maintain insurance that meets the minimum threshold, or if it's learned or determined that they showed us insurance, then subsequently dropped their insurance and went uncovered, and then picked up the insurance again in order for us to sign a DS 2019 or do an extension, that is a willful and knowledgeable violation of their status. And OIS will have to terminate both the J-1 record and the J-2 record. So if a J-2 is out of compliance, the J-1 is out of compliance as well, and they both are going home together. So again, it's kind of more firm language and enforcement of a requirement that is not new. So we have done some investigation. Keela has called around to some plans to sort of make sure that some of our programs that we already recommend from our website. We do recommend a suite of reputable companies that provide relatively inexpensive health care. The healthcare insurance that's available for most of our scholars is far less expensive than the healthcare that any of us can purchase. It's actually a lot cheaper. Admittedly, it does get expensive for dependents. The biggest cost is to the dependents. So if a sole scholar comes, insurance for him or her is actually relatively cheap. When that scholar brings his or her family, the addition of dependents and the insurance costs for them actually is where it really starts to add up. But these companies are keeping pace with the changes and the increased amounts and plan requirements that are coming down from the Department of State. As I said, we will be updating our material as we learn more. We're having to investigate as we go as well. The thing that we don't like about this is you, no doubt, will feel additional pressure to suddenly become, field questions about health insurance, which we don't want you to feel you have to do. Likewise, we're not comfortable about it for that very reason, because we're not trained in vetting healthcare policies. That's a relatively complicated line of work. So it ends up being, as much as we can allow it, it does have to be the scholar's responsibility to confirm details with their carrier. There may be a list of half a dozen requirements that are relatively straightforward and easy to decipher, but as you all are familiar with the fine print, there are the cases where the fine print might create exceptions that undermine the integrity of the plan, which again, we can't, nor can you be held sort of liable or personally responsible for that, or professionally responsible. So in our language, we are going to make sure that it's falling onto the scholar to make sure that they're purchasing an adequate plan. The university student insurance plan, so that student blue plan that has been offered for any registered student, and I know some of you are working not just with scholars, but with enrolled students as well from a personnel perspective. The student plan that's offered through registration and records to all students at NC State does meet the J-1 requirements. That's confirmed. The state employee health plan, which presumably most, if not all of us possess, does not meet the requirement. And I think in large part that's because of the repatriation of remains and evacuation. It's generally, our plan does not possess those two attributes because it's generally assumed that we're all residents and residing in the U.S., so we do not need to have our remains repatriated to another country. So if you have a J-1 who is on the plan, they will have to purchase a supplemental plan that provides what's missing from the state employee plan. We are awaiting confirmation from the graduate school on the GSSP and postdoc plans. I reviewed the literature on the website, and in my assessment, it does meet the requirements, but I'm waiting confirmation from Megan Wilson from the grad school on that. And once we know for sure that it meets the requirements, we'll make that more clear in our written literature as well. We are also working with the Office of Insurance and Risk Management, Jim Semple and company. They manage a plan or coordinate a plan through HTH Worldwide that is offered, for example, to study abroad students. And we're trying to get a group arrangement for our incoming scholars to either be added to that automatically, to have it be a default required plan, which hopefully to some degree the management and administration of the plan, because again it would be a group of several hundred scholars at NC State, but if it were opened up to the UNC system it would be several thousand. There's a potential that HTH would be very interested in coordinating such a plan because it would assure basically that they would have a large pool of registrants purchasing this insurance.
All right, so I'm Keela, as Thomas said earlier. I just want to start off by saying there are some handouts in the back here. There's 3 desks if you go in this middle aisle, so just make sure you pick up the handouts because we'll be using those at the end of the presentation. And also, we have plenty of food, so please keep coming to the front and have more food for us so we don't have to take it all back downstairs. So updates to reporting requirements for J1s and J2s. We're now required to report the email address for the J1 and J2 visitors. We've always collected email address for the J1s, but we've not always collected it for J2s, so that has been updated in our forms. We're also required to report to the Department of State the loss or theft of the DS 2019. Apparently we're supposed to send them an email. We'll do it, so we'll see what happens with that. We're also required to report the final departure of the J2 if it's prior to the final departure of the J1. So we're going to be working with our J1 population to make sure that we get that information from them. So we do have a departure form on our webpage that the J2s could also use to let us know about their final departure. This one was really interesting for us, the prohibition on the electronic sharing of the Form DS 2019 document. So we know a lot of you and a lot of people around campus will scan and email the DS 2019 to the J1 to help with quicker visa processing. This is now explicitly prohibited in the new regulations. And so what we were told is that scanning, emailing, faxing, any other electronic reproduction of the form is prohibited, and that we must plan accordingly when issuing our documents. So it has to be mailed or picked up, and only the original can be provided to the exchange visitor. Now, in a webinar, we're not sure if information we got in this webinar is going to be in the regs, but we were told that if we write copy on the form, that would be okay to scan or fax to the J1. So we have to make sure that we write the word copy on it. Okay.
Keela, are you saying that we can still do that if we just write copy on it now, or do we have to wait until you
We were told a lot of stuff in that webinar that just don't seem right. So I think we will send an update about that. Let's say not do it right now, and then we will update you all on the confirmation of that writing copy on the form before you scan it. Yes?
Is that going to include our 20s?
No, this is just for J1 stuff. Yeah, so Department of State is responsible for the J1 stuff, and so yeah, they're setting these new rules. Yeah, so hopefully Homeland Security doesn't follow suit with that. Yes?
The one that you have on the website right now, the DS 2019, you're saying that I have to, we can send it to them, but they have to have the original signature, or what you saying?
No, so this is once we issue the DS 2019
that,
document. Yeah, that final one that we're issuing.
Okay, the original.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
What I always do, because it takes a while for the original to get to them.
To the person, yes.
I always sent them a scanned copy saying original has been FedEx, this is the tracking number.
Cannot do
We
that anymore.
You got the right copy.
It would help them set up for their interview to get their J-1
Right.
their
And we,
visa soon.
yeah, and we completely understand that, but the Department of State is putting this in the regulation as is not allowed anymore. No more.
But
Yeah.
you can't put copy on it.
We're going to clarify that. So for right now, let's not scan or email anything.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll let you know.
One of the ways that might still help them to get the visa without actually being in violation of this rule would be that they need the DS 2019 primarily to set up a copy of it to set up the visa interview. So there are pieces of information that they need that appear on the DS 2019, like the program number and their CVIS number. So, and if you provided them with those two numbers, now we can't publicize those numbers on our website, but in an email you could provide those pieces of information that would allow them to schedule the visa interview while they're waiting for the actual original DS 2019 to arrive in the post.
So English proficiency. So the sponsor must confirm that the exchange visitor possesses sufficient proficiency in the English language. Oh, tricky words. Okay. So the Department of State has given us 3 measurements that we can use to confirm this. So the first one is a recognized English language test. This is what we're already doing for our J-1 students. The next one is a signed document from an academic institution or English language school. And we're doing this for the study abroad students who are coming from institutions that teach in English. And then the third requirement is what we're doing for your research scholar, professors, or short-term scholars. And that is a documented interview by the sponsor in person, by video conference, or by phone if video conferencing is not available. So we have a new attestation that's a part of the DS 2019 request form that we're going to go over today. But this is information that we are required to have now, a confirmation on file. And this, OIS has already been asking departments to confirm that this person has English ability, but now we have a completely new form that will have to be completed to confirm that the interview occurred. And this is the actual language from the Department of State. So some highlights for this are possessing the proficiency in English to function on a day-to-day basis. So it's not just about being able to speak the language with your professor in the lab. It's about when you're outside of the lab or in other places on campus, being able to function in the United States as a whole. So being able to go to the DMV and communicate, Social Security Administration, get your groceries from Food Line, and things like that. And why the Department of State did give us a statement about this, but I think quite a few of us already know why, because OIS always gets reports from scholars who are not able, who do not have the English language proficiency that allows them to function. And so it's because of the sufficient lack of proficiency to perform their jobs and complete academic programs. And then in addition to this, of course, can your scholar pass that lab safety test? And can your scholar pass the 911 test? If something happens and you need that scholar to call 911, can they explain in English where they are, what the issue is, and what they need? Because it may take some time for the 911 center to get someone who speaks that person's language. So it's a big safety thing as well. So we have a Part A of the DS 2018. So we've always had a Part A and a Part B. So Part A is usually just been the personal information, biographical information for the exchange visitor, and Part B has been the department information. So what we have now as a part of Part A is a pre-arrival guide. And we have a separate pre-arrival guide for the research scholar professor and a separate pre-arrival guide for the short-term scholar. And that is because they have limits on their length of program and other limits that we have to inform them about. And the pre-arrival information includes the estimated cost for health insurance, estimated cost for housing. We have to give the scholar any information on additional fees that may be charged to them, the duration of the program, information about their bars and the 2-year home residency requirement, and a description of their employment activity. So some of this stuff is going to be in the invitation or offer letter that you provide to the scholar when you're offering them the research opportunity. And some of this is going to be in the pre-arrival guide that we've made. So the pre-arrival guide is this document, which is in the back if you didn't have a chance to get one. So this is the one for just the research scholar, and then there's a separate one for the short-term scholar, okay? So if we go through those,
Yeah.
so when you go to the OIS webpage, we have now pre-arrival guide short-term scholar, pre-arrival guide research scholar, and then the part B, you can still use the same part B for either one of those, okay? And what we're recommending is that you only save this web link. Do not save the forms anymore, because as Thomas mentioned, we're not sure what that final rule is going to say, and we may have to change this again. And so if it's information that we are required to have before we issue the DS 2019, we don't want to have to kick back your DS 2019 request because the Department of State changes information and we have to get you to fill out a new form. So just save the web link to the forms section, okay? And then we'll update the forms there. So if we look at the Research Scholar Guide, and I have to give credit to Fernanda here in the front. She's our communications intern, and she's also an international student here at NC State. And she made this, and it looks absolutely wonderful. So she's very talented. So we have our table of contents, of course, which has the information that's going to be in the pre-arrival guide. So I'm not going to be able to go through everything, but I just wanted to highlight some things to you. So this is written to the J-1. And so we have information here about what they must understand. So the things that they are saying that they accept when they agree to come as a J-1. So that's how we need to send this to them before you actually start your process with HR and us issuing the DS 2018. So if there's anything that they're not clear about or have a question about, we have to give them the opportunity to clarify those things before they agree, okay? And then we have a checklist or steps for applying for the J-1 visa. We have information about the health insurance here, and we have some estimated costs. And this is kind of just based off of doing kind of an average with the companies that we have seen offering health insurance, and also looking at what we might possibly get from HTH if the UNC system decides to go with that company. But this is one of the things we're required to put in, is the estimated cost for the health insurance. We're required to have information about housing and estimated costs. So of course we can't do every off-campus housing unit that's around. So we just kind of did ES King and the Avett Ferry Complex, which a lot of our scholars do stay in those facilities anyway. Information about what to bring and temperatures, average temperatures in the area. And then information about their arrival, what they should carry with them at the airport, how to get to Raleigh, how to get to NC State University. We have information about taxi companies that can bring them directly to campus. And we also have a to-do list of things that they should do once they arrive. Sorry. And restaurants and cell phones and dining. So it's a lot of stuff, information about our programs, which we're going to go over that a little bit more detail in just a couple minutes. Computer access, library services, campus recreation, special accommodations, campus safety information, and then we have their terms of agreement, which is their rights and responsibilities. And we have always provided this document early to the, well not early, but at the point that we're issuing the DS 2019, so you've all sent that with the DS 2019 usually. So now it's a part of this document. And so basically now, once you are submitting the request to us, the only thing that you're going to get back now is the DS 2019, because we put everything else in this document for you, okay? And so this is where, again, we stress the health insurance requirement for them and indicating that it can result in termination from the program. And then information on the bars, as well as the English language proficiency requirement. So we would require this signed document when they come to check in, and we will keep extra copies of this in our office so if they don't bring it with them, they'll be able to read it and sign it at that point. Now, so for part A, this is kind of pretty much the same as what you've already been sending. The additional information is really in the the dependent section. So we have the space for them to put in the email address. And when the Department of State put this regulation out, it said for all the J2s, and we are kind of awaiting clarification because children don't have email addresses usually, at least little kids, maybe the teenagers do, and just making sure if that's required that we have that. So we'll let you know that information as soon as we get it as well. But as it's written, it says all J2s email addresses. So. And then we have a certification for the J1 to sign off on that lets them know about them maintaining the health insurance requirements for themselves and their J2s for the duration of the DS 2019. And then our contact information. So it's a very comprehensive guide with lots of information in it that we're required to have now. Yes?
Do we start using this now on May 15th?
Now.
Okay, number 2. Can you put a date on it so we always know when the latest one was put out there in case you put one out later? And there's a date somewhere on it that let you know as of this date that it's the latest one that we got?
Yep, she's got it. Yep, so we'll put a date on that. Thank you. That's a good point. Yep. All right, so part B, which was also in the back. Oh, I didn't grab one, but there are part B's. How would you respond? Yeah, so it's just a couple pages. That would be this one. Okay. So for part B, what we've done is we kind of moved some of the paragraphs around that we had on the form. So this proposed effective date, we put this before the section where you put the dates in because we want to make sure that the departments realize it needs to be at least 90 days into the future from when you're submitting this request to OIS. So we sometimes get requests that are like 3 weeks out. We're like, oh, okay. So for those of you that have been in that situation, you know that we'll usually automatically push the date out anyway because it's kind of impossible for someone to even get the DS-19, plan their travel, get their visa, and be here within 3 weeks. And the issue with that is the scholar has to arrive within 30 days of the program start date. And also, we have to do that validation within 30 days of their start date. So if the record is not validated or activated within 30 days, it automatically closes, okay? So it's not something that we do. It just automatically happens if we don't validate them. And we cannot validate them without physically seeing them, providing the orientation, and making copies of their immigration documents. Yes. And then the funding information, so we did increase the funding amount. So the principal is still $1,500, but for the spouse, it's going to be $800 per month. And for the children, $500 per month for each child. And that is to compensate for the additional insurance costs. So we decided that those amounts should go up as well. And remember, if we are given a range of funding with like the China scholarship students that get that scholarship from the Chinese government, we only can confirm that they're going to get that lower amount. So that's all that we can use. So if someone is saying that they're getting the higher amount, 1,800 or whatever, that's great, but then they need to get China scholarship to email us or to email you confirming that that's what they're going to get. Otherwise, they'll need to provide a personal bank statement to make up for that additional balance that they will have. And this is the attestation of English language ability. So we are requiring that the departments fill this in, and so what you're certifying is that this, the person that is conducting the interview has the job title, they're working at NC State University, they are a native speaker or fluent in English, and the date that they conducted the interview in English with the scholar, the interview start and end time, the scholar's name, and that the scholar's identity was confirmed by looking at their passport and this is their country of citizenship. And they're declaring that the scholar is proficient in English as to participate in the program and function on a day-to-day basis. So that's language we pulled straight from the regulations. So whoever in your department is conducting this interview is certifying this information. So this is not an OIS signature on this. So when we get our audit from the Department of State, if there's an issue, we're going to this person, or we're sending Department of State to that person. Yes?
I have one that I was going to put in the mail today or tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the old application.
Yes, so if it's already signed and everything, then we'll take it. But any new stuff that you're starting has to be on the new forms.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you already have the signatures on there, we'll still accept that. Yes, sir?
Could we have a number of different people doing these interviews as opposed to just one person?
Yes, so as long as it's someone appointed with the university. Yes, that'll be fine. Can you think of anything else I left out? Okay. And then we have, of course, the signature page for everyone. And we also put a checklist here just to make it a little bit more helpful to make sure that you have everything that you need for a completed request. Let me go back to the presentation. Okay. So I talked about not saving the forms, and then the information that we just went over in Part A. So it's a pre-arrival guide, rights and responsibilities, and then that updated certification paragraph for the scholars to sign off on. And then Part B, the changes were higher minimum funding requirements for the dependents, the English attestation, and then the checklist for departments. And other than that, we just moved that paragraph about the dates. But it's really not a lot of changes besides adding in that English attestation, really. So, and now, whoops, my questions, but cross-cultural activities. So in addition to all of this other stuff, we also have a stronger language about offering and making available to the J-1 and their dependents a variety of cross-cultural activities. So OIS already offers this to J1s and J2s, and we have a range of different programs that we provide for them. But since the language is a little bit stronger, we are going to make sure and want to make you aware of that the scholar needs to be given time to participate in these. So we kind of have to consider it as a requirement of the program. So in addition to doing research with us, we all also have to make sure that they have a cross-cultural experience here. The J-1 is, after all, an exchange visitor program. So it's not an employment visa. It is meant to have an exchange component to it. So if you could help us in advertising our programs for our J-1, or, if you talk to a J-1 and they say, they're not making friends or their spouse is having a hard time here, send them over to us and we can talk to them more about our programs that we offer. And those, usually really help a lot with the adjustment issues in the U.S. So we're going to give you more detailed information about each program when we email you after this presentation. But these are the ones that we offer right now, which are Breaking Bread, which is sharing a meal with an American family. Culture Core is where we get invitations from local schools and local businesses. So we may have a business who's sending employees to Brazil, and they want to have someone come in and talk about Brazilian culture and expectations. So we'll contact our students and scholars to go out for that. English Conversation Club on Fridays is here in Daniels Hall, and Tuesdays and Thursdays on Centennial Campus. That'll be in the email camp. I think they changed locations. That one is very informal, and that's where we have a group of Americans, a group of internationals, and everybody just comes together. We pair them up or group them up to just practice their English language skills. The friendship program is where we match an international with an American to build a friendship, and we just require that they meet at least once per month. The IMOM is a spouse club just for females. And that group gets together weekly on Wednesdays, and they have a lot of different activities that they do, and the spouses can bring the children with them. So we have hired a student to babysit once a week so that they can actually be engaged fully in that program and the children are being entertained. And we provide toys and coloring books and all that stuff too. And then iServe is a volunteer program with Americans and Internationals. So if you just have someone who's really interested in helping out in the community locally, they can sign up for this program. And we have projects at least once or twice a month that we are taking students and scholars out to do with that. And also, these are all open to you as well. So if you want to sign up to host some international students for dinner or be matched with some international students or scholars, please let us know. We'll be happy to have you sign up as well. Okay, we're ready.